All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for today's webinar, Speed Up Your Insight with Alteryx and Tableau in the Public Sector. So I'm excited about this topic. We'll introduce it a little bit more here in a minute. It is presented by Technion Data Solutions, and so thank you to Technion for hosting this and allowing us to present. We're excited to do so today. I am joined by Deanna Sanchez, who is an Alteryx ace. That is the highest honor bestowed by Alteryx for people who are masters of the tool, but not only that, who are active in the community helping other people using Alteryx. And so Deanna has been greatly involved with Alteryx for Good, as well as a leader in a couple of the Alteryx user groups, and she's helped start one up in Fort Worth and has been active in the Dallas group for a long time now. So that's really exciting. And again, the Alteryx Ace is the highest honor. Only a few people in the entire world have received that honor. So I'm extremely pleased to not only be joined by Deanna today, but to work with her on a day-by-day basis at Technion. I am Joshua Milligan. I am a consultant at Technion as well. I've been with Technion for almost 15 years now, so it's because I like it, and I love it. In fact, I love working with clients, and I get to play all day with Tableau, which is a lot of fun. I am a Tableau Zen Master, which is Tableau's equivalent of Alteryx Ace. It is the highest honor bestowed by Tableau, and so I'm deeply honored and humbled to be recognized by Tableau for that as well. And both of us consultants at Technion, where we love to work with clients all day long, helping them to look at their data, bring it together, and answer questions about their data. As I mentioned, Technion hosts this webinar, and that is in conjunction with Alteryx and Tableau. So the partnership between Technion, Alteryx, and Tableau is very strong. And it's really exciting because Technion gets to be a strategic leader in the space to come alongside clients and help them think through how to implement Alteryx and Tableau to create incredible solutions around data. So you'll see it in action today. You'll see Alteryx and Tableau, but Alteryx is an incredible platform for bringing data from multiple sources together and then being able to do all kinds of really powerful things, such as supplementing that data with geospatial and geocoding and predictive analytics. And you'll see a lot of that in action today as Deanna goes through it. And then Tableau is another incredible platform, which often is thought of as a data visualization platform, but there's a lot more to it, and we'll see some of that today as we think through how do you ask questions and get answers as you perform visual analytics with Tableau. And so I love both of these platforms, but they're really powerful as you put them together. And so that's the really exciting thing. And at Technion, we love our partnership with both of these companies, using both of their platforms to meet our clients' needs. So we're going to take a look at that today, and specifically how that works in the public sector. We'll kind of bounce back and forth between Deanna and myself as we demo some of this, but we're excited to do so. Just one note, a couple notes actually. First, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to get that recording later. We'll send out an email with a link. And another thing to note is that there should be a questions panel somewhere in your GoToMeeting application or GoToWebinar application. So look for that and feel free to type any questions as we go along. We'll hold off on answering most of them until the end, but that way we don't forget to come back to them. Deanna, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off, and I'm excited to see what you have for us today.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Joshua, and thank you for that excellent introduction. And it is always a privilege to work with you as well, especially a privilege to work not only with you, but at Technion Data Solutions, as Joshua also mentioned. And it's always wonderful to collaborate with Joshua on these webinars. We actually have some other webinars we have worked on together showing the beauty of Alteryx and Tableau in collaboration. So when you have time, feel free to go to our technion.usa.com website, look under videos, and you'll find our other webinars there as well. But I'm very excited today to show you Alteryx and just a little bit of what Alteryx can do. And as Joshua mentioned, we will pass the ball back and forth. You'll see me create some output using Alteryx, and then Joshua will create some beautiful visualizations in Tableau, and then we'll come back and I'll show you a little bit more of Alteryx and some really special aspects of Alteryx, especially the spatial and demographic data available with Alteryx. And then Joshua will take that output and visualize that as well. So I'll go ahead and show my screen here. And Joshua, let me know when you can see my screen. I do have Alteryx up and showing.
I don't see it yet.
Okay, let's see. Let me make sure that it is up.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, excellent. I think there's just a small delay there, but that happens with webinars sometimes. So excellent. So it is showing now then?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And for those of you who are really new to Alteryx, this is Alteryx. It's a drag and drop interface, and you'll see me drag tools to the canvas and start creating workflows, as we call them, in Alteryx. And these workflows are allowing people to not only prep and blend your data, but there's so much more that Alteryx does. It is widely known as a data prep and blending tool. However, as you can see from the tool sets here at the top, we've got so much more than preparation and joining and parsing, and not only that, but transforming your data. We also have connectors for in-database. So as I'll show you in a moment, Alteryx can connect inside of a database with ODBC or OLEDB connections, along with some other options. We also have reporting tools and documentation tools. And then we have this wide range of spatial tools, and you'll see me use some of these today to create esri shapefile output. So if you are using ESRI, or as we call it esri sometimes in the GIS world, you'll see me produce a shapefile that you can actually use in other software or use again here in Alteryx. And yes, you can actually utilize data and create it as a shapefile and output it if it has a spatial component to it. We also have interface tools for analytic apps. And then Alteryx is also widely known for having predictive tools and A/B and time series tools as well. So you've got your data investigation tools and a wealth of predictive tools such as linear and logistic regressions, decision trees and forest models and stepwise. Also neural network tools. All of these tools are based on R code, which is an open source statistical code widely used. And then all of the R code is wrapped into each of these tools. So you not only have predictive options, but you've got prescriptive tools as well that tell you what to do with that predictive model. We also have lots of connectors, address, and I'll show you that in a moment of what we can do with address data, and demographic and behavior analysis tools, as well as really advanced developer tools, such as API connectors, Python connecting, and also R code and run commands. So that's just a snippet of what you can do in Alteryx. Just in the time we have today, I'll only be able to show you really what the tip of the iceberg is in Alteryx, but hopefully I'll be able to show you quite a lot in just that short amount of time that we have today. So with Alteryx, a lot of people who utilize Alteryx also have utilized Excel. And if you're using Excel, you're probably used to VLOOKUPs, for example, and you're used to pivot tables. You can actually do all of that in Alteryx as well, and you can do it with transparency into your data. And by transparency, I mean that you can actually see what's going on with that VLOOKUP, or as we call it in Alteryx, a join. And you can also test and run the workflows without ever having to produce output. So you can actually browse into your data using the Browse tool and see your data without having to output to Excel, for example, then open Excel, check to see if it was done correctly, close Excel, go back to Alteryx, and so on. You can actually do all of this in Alteryx long before you produce output. So I'm going to show you very briefly how we would set up a join, but first I'll show you in Excel kind of what that would look like. So in Excel you might have a tab here such as California funding data, and we've got an entity ID field that is really our key field to do the join on. The same for another tab of California entities. We've got an entity ID field again that you will do that VLOOKUP on in Excel, and you would find what matches between the two entity IDs. So here we have what kind of looks like a VLOOKUP. It's not truly a VLOOKUP in Alteryx, but it demonstrates that here the key fields are actually matching, or that entity ID. And so everything that matched joins from left to right. So you've taken that first tab of data on the left, and then that second tab of data on the right. And if your key fields match, then you have a join in Alteryx, or a VLOOKUP in Excel. So in Alteryx, I'm actually just going to drag some tools to the canvas. Again, it is a drag and drop interface. And I'm going to pull in an input data tool, and I'm going to connect to my data. And I'll show you the wide range of what you can connect to in Alteryx. So Alteryx not only connects to files, which I'm about to do, but it can also connect to SQL Server, Oracle, and Hadoop, even other databases. So here's that ODBC and OLEDB that I mentioned earlier. We also have Oracle OCI and Teradata bulk loaders. And you also have Esri connections. So you can actually connect to Esri geodatabases as well. My degree is actually in GIS, and I've been performing spatial analytics since about 1997. I like to think I'm not that old, actually. So I actually started using Esri way back when in 97, and so I'm definitely a fan of the software, and Alteryx does have connectors for that. So here with File, I can click on File, and I'm going to navigate to just a directory where my data are stored. But first I want to show you all of the options you have for connectivity in Alteryx. Alteryx actually does not store your data, so it is not a database, but it actually points to your data. So you can point to files, as I'm doing here, or you can point to databases and have database connections. So again, you're really just pointing to that file, and your data stay pristine. So all of the changes that you make in the workflow to your data set actually are not applied to your input data set unless you deliberately decide to overwrite that data set. So really, you're only pointing to your data. You're not modifying or changing your original data in any way unless you decide to output and overwrite that data. But I'll show you here, we've got lots of options for the Microsoft suite of tools such as Excel and Access. We can actually connect also to CSV files. You can connect here to your Esri personal geodatabases and shapefiles. Even bring in those old flat ASCII files and DBase files. For those old Esri users like me, you know those DBF files as well. You can also connect to SAS and SPSS, and even bring in zip archive files or gzip archive, those tarred gzips as we're used to seeing in the GIS world as well. So there's a lot of options here where you can actually bring in data, even Google Earth KML and JSON data. So for this exercise, though, I'm actually just going to connect to a data set, and this is actually going to be the California Entities YXDB. So a YXDB is actually an Alteryx database, or YXDB. So I've actually output data into an Alteryx database format, and this optimizes my data. It is the native format for Alteryx, and it runs very efficiently in Alteryx. So Alteryx does run in virtual memory, so you'll see as I run these workflows, it is blazingly fast. It will actually churn through thousands of records, even millions of records, and it's amazing. You'll see this run sometimes in less than a second. So I highly recommend exploring the really cool memory capacity of Alteryx. It does run in virtual memory, and again, it is super fast, as you'll see in a moment. So I've connected to this California Entities data, YXDB, and you can see I get a preview of the data here. So I've got an entity name, and then I've got an entity ID, which will be my key field, and some other data, some address data and some fiscal data, and so on. I'm going to bring in another input tool, and this time I'm actually going to go back and connect to that same directory. This time I'm going to connect to some pension funding data, which is a CSV. So the nice thing in Alteryx is you can actually connect to many different data types all in one workflow. I could even bring in a database connection for my third connection and join all of this data, prep and blend this data, and I'm not limited to one data type in my workflow. So that's one of the beautiful things about Alteryx is I can have CSVs, Excel files, in database connections, and prep and blend and create and even apply predictive tools to that data all in one workflow. So here I've got this view into my second data set. I've got an entity name, another entity ID field, fiscal data, and some actuarial data as well that I'll be bringing in and actually joining on this. So one of the nice things about Alteryx is you can actually view your data types as well. So if I click over here on metadata, I can quickly see my field names, my data types, my file size, and also the source of the data. So I can see here my entity ID for row number 2 is actually a double size 8. But if I click on the second input, my entity ID is a vstring 254, which is the default for comma-separated values. So in order to join the data, I actually need the data types to be very similar. You can only join numbers to numbers or strings to strings and so on. So I'm actually going to modify one of these inputs and actually manually change the data type. So I'm going to click back here and I'm going to pull in a select tool. And select is a very versatile tool. There's a lot you can do with this tool, as you'll see. And with the select tool, I've got all of my field names. I can actually just click this drop down and change my file type. So I'm going to change it to a vstring to match the other file type in the other input. I can even rename here in my field. So I can actually just call this name if I want to. Any renaming I do in the select tool actually applies and holds throughout the rest of the workflow stream. So it really is that easy to rename your columns. You actually just type it here in the select tool. No more writing code to do any of this. In fact, you don't have to write code at all when you use Alteryx. So all of the code is behind the scenes. It is an XML-based framework, and so it's all behind the scenes, and you don't have to worry about writing code at all to perform these analytic functions. If you do like writing code, however, we do have that Python tool I showed and the run command tool as well, and some other coding tools if you do want to input code. And it also accepts SQL script as well. So now that I've changed my data type, I'm going to just bring in a join tool and I'm going to join the data. And with the join tool, you'll see that I can actually join on specific fields, and I'm going to choose from the drop-down that entity ID. So here's my key field on the left and my key field on the right, or my left and right inputs. And you can see I have pretty much an embedded select tool here where I have all of my field names. And if I wanted to, I could even use the drop down and modify my data types here, my file size. I could rename here if I want to as well. So I can actually apply this in the join tool also. Also in the join tool, I have 3 outputs. So you'll see here on the outputs, I have a left, join, and right. And these correspond here to left unjoined, or what didn't match from the left input, the inner join, or what matched between both inputs, or your VLOOKUP, so to speak, in Excel, and then your right unjoined, or what didn't match on the right. So I'm just going to add browses, and I'll just right-click and add all browses here. And then I'll click Run Workflow up here at the top. You can see that ran in less than half a second. I'm bringing in over 1,400 records here, and it ran in 0.4 seconds. So again, it runs in virtual memory, and it's extremely fast. I'm actually going to click here and show my connection progress for my workflow so that you can see the record numbers coming through and the file size. You can apply this on any workflow that you're creating. And this really helps to allow me to see, okay, 1,447 records from my right input all found a match on that key field, and I can actually look at the data. So now that I have the data joined or performed that VLOOKUP in Alteryx, I can actually open this window and I can see here's my data coming in on the left with that entity ID. There's the fiscal year information. And then as I scroll across, let me get to this window here. See if I can get this to move there for me. There we go. I've got the same entity name, the right entity ID from the right input, and then all of that fiscal and actuarial data that came in on the right. So all of these entity IDs found a match with each other, and you can see I did a one-to-many or even a many-to-many match in Alteryx, which is actually very capable using the join tool. So I had for each one entity, it found a mini match here in the pension funding data. I can actually quickly now go to my other output and look at these 20 that fell off on the left. These did not find a match. And now I can actually look at the entity ID for these 20 items and maybe start asking some questions and maybe say, wonder if these are misspelled or if they need a leading zero or why they didn't find a match in the other data set. So you can see the transparency available in Alteryx. I'm not producing output at all. I'm simply producing small temp tables using the browse tool, and I'm browsing into my data. So it really is that efficient. You can actually just see exactly what your data are doing. And again, VLOOKUPs in Alteryx, or as we call them, joins, are extremely simple. You just choose your key field to join on and then click Run. So it really is that easy. Next, I'm actually going to go to what looks like a union in Alteryx, and I'll produce some output, and I'll send that over to Josh. So unions, as you've probably seen in Excel, are usually when you have three or, a couple of tabs or more. This one I've got some 2011 pay data, 2012 pay data for another tab, and 2013 for another tab. If I union those, I'm really just stacking them one on top of the other. So you can see here my 2011 data, 2012 data, and 2013. I simply lined up the columns and stacked these one on top of the other. So in Excel, you would be doing a lot of cutting and pasting. You would cut each of these and paste them one under the other to create this union. Well, in Alteryx, it's a lot easier, actually. So I've got that same data set here. It was that pay information that you just saw in Excel, and I've got 2011, 2012, and 2013 data. It's that easy to just pull in a union tool. I'm going to connect each of these with my drag and drop interface here. And with that, I'm going to actually manually configure my fields to see if they line up when I connect them. It turns out they don't line up. Input number 3 actually has underscores in some of the field names, so they're not aligning under the main columns. But I can resolve that very quickly. So if I click on these, I can actually hold down the Shift key and click. I can literally just move the columns over. It's that simple. So now I've lined up all of these columns. I can take my year and notes information and move those over. Line those back up again. And then for agency, I can actually put jurisdiction name under agency. So even if the column does not have the same name, but I know it's the same data, in this case it is just the county, I can actually just line those up myself. I don't even have to have the same names to actually align the data. So now that I've aligned them, I can browse the data. I'll go ahead and click Run. Again, it ran in 0.6 seconds. I'm bringing in 110,000 records at one time, and that was still less than a second for it to run. So now you can see all of my data. These are all aligned. And if I open this window just a little bit, you can see my 2011 data, 2012, 2013, and they're all lined up correctly. So it's really that simple. And again, I haven't produced output. I'm just browsing into the data. So now I'm going to produce some output. So the really neat thing with output, I can actually output this data here. I have some additional options for my output. So you see almost everything that was the same on the file input options. All of these options you actually have for output as well. But now I have Tableau options. So I can output to a Tableau data extract.tde or a Tableau hyperdata extract. So I'm going to choose a hyperdata extract. I'm going to call this Union Output. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And then I'm going to click Run. And you can see everything that's happening in my workflow. Not only do I see my data in the results window, but if I click on the workflow itself, I can see everything that's happening throughout the workflow and even how fast it ran. So you have lots of visibility into your data prep and blending and all of your functions inside Alteryx. So now I'm going to switch it over to Joshua, and he's going to take this union output and show some really cool things in Tableau that you can do with this data.
All right, thank you, Deanna. I'm going to bring up Tableau and the output file that you created there.
Okay.
So it's really exciting to watch Deanna create flows that shape the data, and then have some interaction with her and talk about, well, it would work really well if we had these fields, or if the data was in this shape. And then I can take it in Tableau and start to ask additional questions about the data, and then to visualize it and start to answer some of those questions, and potentially raise even more questions. So here we're looking at the main work area of Tableau, and like Alteryx, it's a very drag and drop, hands-on, intuitive interface. So you can see I've got the union output data set here along with all of the fields. And Tableau has divided those up into dimensions and measures, which we'll see those work here in a little bit. Deanna mentioned that she can output all kinds of data sources, and including some that work really well with Tableau, those being the Tableau data extract, and then the newer version, the hyper data extract. But Tableau also can connect to all kinds of sources of data, file-based data sources. We'll take a look at some spatial files here in a little bit, because Alteryx can output those, and that's a really exciting thing. Server-based data sources, cloud-based data sources, all kinds of things, and then even some ODBC and JDBC. You can even write your own web data connector if you want to extract something specifically. There's an interface for that. So all kinds of fun things there. But here, Deanna has given me an output that I really like, the hyper data extract, which comes straight into the hyper engine, which is really fast and performant in Tableau. So I'm just going to start dragging and dropping, and I may have some specific questions right off, or I may just be exploring the data visually. Today, what I wanted to focus on was just understanding some of the base pay for some of these employees, and the job titles that are out there. And so I can do something like look at median base pay, and we'll start there. So across the entire data set, looks like the median base pay is 114,000. Now I said across the entire data set. Actually, I've already sort of narrowed it down from the massive amount of data that Deanna has given me. I'm only looking at fire and police. So we've got fire and police, and you can see Tableau is just allowing me to drag and drop these fields, and I can encode them in different ways. And what I mean by that is that I can use them for color or size or shape. So if I drop on color, I might get something like this. Now blue and orange are great colorblind safe colors and a great default for Tableau, but I might want to change those. I think fire maybe more red, and police maybe more blue. So I can totally customize any visualization that I want to. And then I can start to ask additional questions. So I start to see a little bit of a difference between the median base pay between fire and police, but I might want to drill into that a little bit. So let's look at just police, and maybe look at those job titles specifically, so I can start to look at all of the different job titles out there within the police department, and start to understand what the difference in base pay might look like there. I can actually see the values. I might do a sort, which will help me see that yes, indeed, the chief of police does typically make more than anyone else. But interesting to see the shape here of the data as I start to explore it even more. And I start to see some things that I would expect, and potentially some things that I wouldn't expect as I go through this. Now, This is great. I'm starting to understand what pay looks like within the police department, but it still may not be the full picture. I may have questions. For example, I think there's probably only one chief of police, but there's probably a lot of police officers, and all of those police officers don't make the exact same salary. So I may want to start to understand the distribution a little bit. So I could do something like take the employee name and bring that into the detail here and change my mark type to circle, which will help me start to see how do we see differences within each of those job titles. And so I've got different individuals who, of course, make different salaries, probably dependent on a lot of different factors. I might want to go back to the original sort that I had, switch it to field. There we go. So chief of police is still on top, and sure enough, there's only one chief of police. There's several deputies, and then quite a few sergeants and officers throughout. But this starts to get to be really interesting because now I can start to see that there are certain individuals who maybe fall above or below where I might expect. I can also do some analytics here. So I've got all kinds of different possibilities in Tableau for doing visual analytics, things like averages and medians and trend lines and forecasts, and now those would apply more to a time series or a timeline. I can do cluster analysis and all kinds of things. Here I'm going to look at a box plot just to start to understand a little bit more how that distribution of pay might look. That'll help me understand where the median is for each of these job titles, and then anything that falls outside as an outlier. I might have some questions about how is it that a deputy chief of police has a base pay of $25,000, and I can dig into those details, and I may have that in the data. It may be that there's a lot of benefits that supplement that salary, or it could be that this individual worked for a quarter of the year, and that's why their base pay was so low. So I will need to dig in even more into the data, but Tableau allows me to do that and to continue on with this data discovery and exploration of the data until finally I'll do some storytelling around the data as well. But we'll hold off on that for now because I'm going to give control back to Deanna, and she's going to do some more incredible magic with creating some data sets.
Excellent, and thank you, Joshua. I always love watching you work your magic there in Tableau. It is very cool how quickly you can actually visualize something in Tableau. And like Joshua mentioned, you can gain insights and even start asking some questions about your data right away. Joshua was only presenting for just a few minutes there, but already had some analyses up and running. So that was excellent to see. So thank you, Joshua. And again, let me know if you can see my screen again.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to quickly show, just in the interest of time, some of the other options available in Alteryx. You can actually filter your data very easily in Alteryx. So you can see here I've pulled in some address data with a company name and a score. And I can not only chain my filters, so I can actually set up a custom filter of city equals this or city equals this, and so on, and then take the output of that. So where it meets the criteria, and it's true, there were 25 that had that result that met that criteria for the two cities there. I can actually apply a change filter and say score is greater than 25, and then see my results where I have the two cities and now the score is greater than 25. Then I can add another criteria where the score is less than 50, and now I have my results here, 9 records, 8 for Agawam and 1 for Belchertown there. And you can see the scores between 25 and 50. Or I can even make a compound filter. So I can set up a boolean statement, and I can say the score is greater than 25 and score less than 50, and the city equals Agawam or city equals Belchertown. Run that and still receive the same 9 records. So a lot of options with filters and also with formula tools in Alteryx. So you can bring in a formula tool, and actually almost every formula you have in Excel you can actually replicate in Alteryx. So we've got conditional formulas such as if, then, else ifs, and end ifs there. You've got your conversions, convert to string and to number, and so on. Got date, time, and finance and math formula that are already embedded, along with some specialized formula and string formula. So you can do get word, left, or length. You can even do a substring if you'd like to put some substring formula in there. There's also regex or regular expression formulas and so on. And then some of my favorites are the test formulas. So you can do is null or is empty and test for those items as well. So again, there's a lot you can do just with the filter and formula tools in Alteryx. Alteryx also has some great reporting options. So you can see here I'm actually bringing in a shapefile. So this is just a very quick shapefile, a .shp. And you can see I've got a store number, a city, and then a field for the spatial object. This is actually containing the point, polyline, or polygon from the shapefile. So there's an actual field for that in the data. I'm going to run this very quickly so you can see some of the spatial things I'm doing with it. And some of the things that I do in the spatial is I'm actually bringing in a trade area tool. The trade area tool actually allows me not only to make a radius, but I can actually perform a drive time. So the data in the spatial data bundle are TomTom data, and you can utilize the TomTom data for drive time analytics and for geocoding as well. So I'll show you in a moment the geocoding tools, but I can make a very quick trade area here. And you can see when I've run this, now I've got my 10 stores and the individual drive time trade areas around them. I'll actually run this very quickly so you can see how fast this actually runs. I also have some customer data. It's just a CSV file with customer information, and I've got an address, city, state, and zip, and so on. I already have latitude and longitude, or this data set's already geocoded, but I can use a create points tool to use that longitude and latitude and create a spatial object field containing those points. So now you can see my centroid or my point field showing those points. I've got a lot of options here for reporting, so when I run this, you'll actually see that I'm creating a map for the report, I'm creating a chart, and I've got a table for this report. You can see it's churning through the data, it's generating maps for each one. And these are 10 different PDFs that were actually run in just seconds for each report here. So I'm just going to click on one of these. And you can see that these reports are generated per store. So I've got a title, I've got today's date, the store number will change per store. I've got my chart here, I've got a quick table, and then I've got a map with color-coded customer data along with it for each one. So I can actually look at this for every single store if I want to. I can also output all of these to a specified directory. I'm going to show you something really cool about this. This is a great feature in Alteryx. So I'm going to move this around here, and I'm going to actually disable this container. So you can actually contain parts of your workflow and disable it and run other parts of your workflow. So now I'm going to go down here to the demographic report data. So I'm pulling in a demographic report using the Experian dataset. So in addition to the spatial data bundle, you can purchase the demographic data package, and that actually provides over 1,600 variables from Experian. They're very robust variables. I'll show you what those look like in the next workflow. But you can actually pull the demographic data for your trade areas, which is what this will be doing. As you can see, it's connecting up here to this trade area. So it's actually pulling demographic data for each trade area for every store, and it's going to generate a report, but it's going to do something really neat. I've used a formula tool to create a file path. So I've got this directory here called C Alteryx Reports just here on my laptop. It's going to actually create a subdirectory for the city based on the data actually coming in. It's going to make another subdirectory based on store number, and then it's going to label the demographic report .pdf with the store number. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Here I've got my C Alteryx Reports directory. There's nothing in the directory. The directory is actually empty. And I'm going to go ahead and click Run. So you can see what's going on with the data. You get visibility into this with your workflow. You can see how it's pulling in the data. Again, this is for 10 stores, creating the drive time, all on the fly. This is actually not pre-prepared at all. This is literally running in 14.1 seconds on my laptop. And it's creating a report for every store. And now it has this wealth of demographic data for each store. And it's actually pulled all of that data in 14 seconds for 10 stores. The really neat thing is, if I go to my directory, now this directory is populated. It created a subdirectory per city. Then I have a subdirectory per store. And then I have a demographic report labeled by the store. So this is the report that you just saw. And it was really that fast. So again, that directory had nothing in it when I first created this. But then I ran it and burst those reports into this shared directory. For example, you can actually use this process and actually burst reports, say, every Friday on a scheduled basis, and then give access to that shared directory to others to just grab their report every Friday afternoon. You could even set up an email in your reporting tools to email everyone and let them know that their report is ready, or it can also contain the report in the email also. So I mentioned that there's a geocoding option. So here I've got this trade area with the stores, the customer data, and I have a geocoder. So in our geocoding tools, we actually have CAS as well. So CAS is the, let's see, let me get to the right data set there. CAS is our coding accuracy support system from the U.S. Postal Service. This actually cleans and standardizes all of your addresses before geocoding. This is actually updated every 2 months in Alteryx, so it's a very robust system, and we do have a top-of-the-line geocoders as well that also utilize zip9 geocoding, and there's an option for reverse geocoding also. Speaking of demographic data, I'm going to pull in some demographic data now, and I'm going to send that over to Josh, and then he's going to work his magic again in Tableau. But as I mentioned, the demographic data come from Experian, and this is updated every 6 months, so you get very fresh data. And the really neat thing about this is I have multiple geographies I can choose from. So not only can I input block groups, but I can input census tracts, counties, DMAs, even CBSAs. So if I want to pull in core-based statistical areas, I can pull this in metro or micro level and actually get straight to that. There's actually also places. This, for example, would be cities. So it pulls in the city limit boundary according to the vintage of the data. There's also a process where you can pull in the center of the city and utilize that data as well. There's also zip codes also in the data. So there's a wealth of data here just in the Experian data set. I'm actually pulling in some block groups. So since I'm from the Dallas area, I'm going to pull in the Dallas block groups from Texas. And you can see here, when I run the data, if I have the spatial file with it, I can actually see these block groups in the Dallas area. Now I can actually go to the variables. So in Experian, again, there's over 1,600 variables here. We have not only the ACS or American Community Survey data from the U.S. Census, but consumer expenditure, business summary data, segmentation or lifestyle data, and occupation and employment data, and so on. One thing I'll mention before I go to the variables is you also have housing unit data. So you can look at housing value, tenure, and so on, owner versus renter occupied data, even housing value data in the housing value cohorts. So there's a lot of options here for your housing data to be used for the public sector as well. Here's the variables. I'm actually going to go to my current year estimates, and I'm going to just pull in the total population for the current year. Again, this is 2016 data since I have it as a demo on my laptop, so it's not the most current year there. But I can also go to by percent, and I'm going to pull in some school enrollment data, percent enrolled grades 1 through grades 4. So I'm pulling in this data for my current year, and I'm going to do the same for the 5-year projection. I'm going to see how does that grow 5 years projected from now using the algorithms provided by Experian, and what are the enrollment percentages for grades 1 through grades 4 5 years from now. So I can actually pull this data in and use my select tool. and I can actually rename the variable fields. So when you first run this data, Experian does have the shortened variable names for the headers. You can actually rename that in your select tool, and there's another option as well. So now I've got my data renamed. I've got the block group FIPS code, or Federal Information Processing Standards key here for each block group. I've got my renamed fields for my percent enrollment and then my projected enrollment. And I can actually look here, for example, at block group number 2. Population this year is 1632. It's going to project up to 1658. And that percent enrollment is going to increase by 0.5 points there. And I can actually look at this block group here in my map. So I can choose zoom to selection. And here's this block group on my map. So I can actually visually go straight to that block group. One cool thing about Alteryx is we also have aerials. So if you do need aerial data, we have the aerial data here as well. It's by Digital Globe. I'm going to switch back to my TomTom data, which also provides the maps and street network behind the scenes there. So I'm going to run this and create an esri shapefile from the block group data that you've seen here. And I'll send that over to Joshua. Very quickly, I also am going to pull in some other data. So this time I'm going to pull in some counties. You'll see here I've got 3 counties that I've pulled in: Denton, Dallas, and Tarrant County in Texas. And with the counties, I actually want to go to some variable data. This time I'm going to occupation and employment. I'm going to look 5 years from the data set, and I can actually go into, say, labor force if I want to. I can look at the labor force data and see how many are in the labor force, civilian employed and unemployed, not in labor force or in the armed forces. So you actually have data for this. You also have occupational data. So I'm going to look at occupations here. Maybe I want to look at the service industry. I can actually have breakouts for the service industry and even details for that protective service for firefighting and law enforcement as well. So one thing I'm going to do actually is uncheck my service here, and I'm actually going to go into the by percent and look at employment by industry, all industries, and just look at what the percent employment for all of these industries are. There's options for details if I want to go deeper into, say, educational and healthcare services. I could click on that, but for this example, I'm going to just output this percentage data for all employment by every industry in the data set and send that over to Joshua. The neat thing is I actually have my select tool here. So you can see all of my data. You can see if I run this, I now have the headers from Experian. And unless you've got these memorized, such as this is agriculture, this is arts, and so on, if you've used this data a lot, there's a really quick way to rename this. I'm actually using a dynamic rename tool. And now I've renamed these using a lookup table embedded in Alteryx, and now I've renamed these to layman's terms. And so I can actually use what's called a transpose, and what you would normally say is a pivot in Excel, and I can pivot this data. So it's going across right now, but maybe I want it to go vertically so that you can actually create some pie charts from this data. I can actually use the transpose tool, keep my key fields the same, say that I want to pivot all of this other data here. And once I've pivoted the data, now you can see I've got the information for Dallas and for all the other counties. And now I've got each one of these categories per county. So you can see all of these go to Dallas, and then it starts again for Denton, and then again for Tarrant. And now I have my values as a pivot table, or in Alteryx is a transpose. There's also a crosstab table available to undo that. And then I've actually produced this as a shapefile. So I'm creating that spatial object, creating it as a shapefile, and sending it over to Joshua. So I'm going to go ahead and click Run. You can see it's turning through all these records. Here's the number of records coming through. It's generating the data, and all of a sudden now I have output. Very quickly, I wanted to show that there is an option here where I can do area in square miles. Lots of other options here as well. And now I've got all of that data and my area in square miles also. And again, you saw how fast that ran. So right before I switch this over to Joshua, I wanted to quickly add that for the public sector, Alteryx is listed on the GSA schedules. So you may know the GSA schedules as the federal schedules as well. So Alteryx is listed on the GSA schedules. It also holds multiple DoD certificates of networthiness. So if you are interested in this, Alteryx actually has quite a lot of experience with Department of Defense certificates of networthiness and also on the GSA schedule. So I wanted to quickly add that. And now, Joshua, I will transfer this over to you. And Joshua, I don't know if we can hear you, so just in case you might be muted, I know that can happen sometimes.
Thank you, Deanna. I think that was the case. So.
It happens to me all the time. So.
No, but thank you very much. So yeah, I'm excited. I love the fact that you can generate spatial objects directly from Alteryx, and I love it so much because Tableau then can take these spatial objects and it's very easy to visualize them. So things like counties or states or congressional districts, Tableau has all of that built in. But then Deanna showed some of these trade areas or drive time areas. Those are things that are very unique to your data, and so it's very incredible to be able to create those in Alteryx and then use them in Tableau. So here in the data set that Deanna just created, there is a geometry object, and if I just double click that, you'll see all of those block codes show up here in Tableau. Now I'm going to also bring in the key so that I can split them out into each individual block code, and now you'll see that each of those is an actual object, and we're showing it on a map. Lots of different things I can do now. I could take that percent enrollment and color code the block codes by percent enrollment, or I could take the population, and since I have the current and the projected, then in Tableau I can do a calculation and say what will the change be over time, and so I could start to look at the block codes in that way, and that becomes very powerful because now I may see some patterns or some areas that may or may not be surprising. So here along the I-35 corridor, definitely some areas that are expected to dramatically change, either to grow or decline in population. And then definitely I noticed around the southwest and northeast sides, there are definitely some areas that are expected to change in the next 5 years. But Tableau also allows me to look at this in different ways. So I might want to visualize this not as a geometry or as a map. I may want to instead take a look at that population change and look at that in terms of what the current population is, so that I start to understand the significance. So I'll again bring in the key so that I can start to see that split out. Now I can see each one of those block codes as an individual point on this scatter chart. So the higher it is, the higher the current population, and then as you move down, the lower the current population. But then to the left or right of this line, and I might even help demonstrate it more with the color, I can see which are going to decline and which are going to grow. And this is really kind of neat because now I start to understand the significance of that decline or that growth. A lot of these that have a higher percentage of decline are in fact smaller in terms of the current population anyways. There are definitely some outliers and some significant block code growth. Some that will experience high growth, and that may be already fairly populated. But where this really can be exciting, because just looking at this, I don't know where these are located, although I do see some additional insights into the data. But Tableau allows me to bring together multiple visualizations in a dashboard, and not only to bring them together where I can see them together, but to interact with them together. So I might look at my geographic visualization as well as my distribution here. I can rearrange the dashboard a little bit to start to see it maybe even a little bit better. But then I can create some interaction. So here I'm just going to highlight the key. And as I do that, now notice that if I were to select all of these block codes that are 40% decline or greater, now I can start to see where those are geographically. And it's very interesting to see all around here in the northwest kind of area of the Dallas area. So some very industrialized areas that are expected to decline in terms of population. I can start to take a look at what are my larger block codes currently, and are we going to see an increase or decline? I can do the same thing here on the right, where I take a look at the ones that are expected to see significant growth and see where those are. And so it starts to become very interactive, and I can really start to draw lots of insights from the data by looking at it in different ways and then relating those different ways through some interactivity. And then ultimately, what I may want to do is take the results of all of my findings in Tableau, the things that I've discovered and analyzed, and then make that available to the end user so I can create a dashboard. So here, the workforce distribution, the projection for 2021 that Deanna created, I have something that I might give to an end user, a fully functioning dashboard where you can see the distribution and you can then interact with it, and you can start to see for each county what's the percentage of the workforce for education and healthcare in this example. Or as I go down, I can start to see where each of these might fall, and I'll start to see some differences or some similarities between the counties. So interesting to see manufacturing a little bit higher there in Tarrant County, a little bit higher in the Dallas area is arts and entertainment. A lot of them are very similar, but construction is not. Construction, not as much going on in Denton County as Dallas and Tarrant County, or at least not as much projected to go on. So lots of different ways to visualize data and then to make it fully interactive and to give even an end user the ability to uncover insights for themselves or to show those insights that you've come up with and to share the stories that you find in the data. So lots of really cool things that can be done with Tableau and Alteryx. Thank you so much for joining the webinar, and because you've joined, I'd like to share something special with you. Technion is presenting what they're calling the Alteryx and Tableau Quick Start. So if you're thinking about Tableau and Alteryx, or maybe you have one or the other, or even both, this is an incredible opportunity for Technion to guide you through the process of thinking how you can use Alteryx and Tableau together strategically. How can you use the power of both to multiply and come up with something even greater? So the quick start, even if you don't have the software, there are ways that Technion can work with you to get up and running with trial software. And then the quick start program is great for training as well as some custom looks at your data. So if you're interested, please contact PJ Hoke. Her email is there on the screen, and I'm sure in the follow-up email we'll give some details around this program as well. Now we are at time, so I understand if anyone has to drop off, but we do have a few questions already there, and if you have any more, feel free to type them in really quickly, and if we don't get to them right now, we will definitely try to follow up with you. I'll go through the ones that I see so far. So there is a question here about Alteryx and Tableau performing with large data sets, specifically in Hadoop. Now I'll speak to the Tableau side, and Deanna, if you have any thoughts about Alteryx. But Hadoop can work really well with Tableau. I do know that sometimes, just in the way that that Hadoop is structured, you can occasionally run into performance issues, but there are strategies around that in terms of partitioning or having some bucketed fields or changing some settings for some parallelization and that sort of thing. So there are definitely strategies for the times when you do run into performance issues, and we've definitely worked through that with clients before. Any thoughts on the Alteryx side?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly add, and thank you for that great explanation. I'll actually share my screen really quickly to show some of the server options with Hadoop. Very quickly on that, but Joshua explained it very well on what is possible with Hadoop, and yes, you can definitely connect to Hadoop in Alteryx. So let's see. Joshua, would you have time to pass me the ball on sharing the screen really quickly?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I'll go back into that input data tool, and now I'll go down to Hadoop. I just quickly wanted to show you some of the options here for your server. So you have the HTTP, the web, but you also have Knox Gateway as well. So you do have quite a few options here, and then there's even options for Kerberos as well. So again, you do have these connectors, and if you have more questions on that, we'd be glad to work with you and answer those also.
All right, thank you so much, Deanna. I see a few other questions. We'll get to them, but I did see a question here that I just have to answer. It says, I know there's a lot of online resources for Tableau, but I like to write my own notes in the margins, go through the pages, etc. So favorite beginner Tableau book? Well, I definitely have a favorite because I wrote it.
Yay!
Well, so shameless self-promotion, but learning Tableau 10. Actually, I am just finishing up the next edition. So this one is out there and definitely covers the foundational topics for Tableau and still really great, but Tableau continues to move ahead with new features. And so here in the next month or so, I'll have a new edition out. So I'm excited about that. There are plenty of other books, and I don't want to say that there's not, but you did ask my favorite, so there it is. Deanna, any last thoughts before we sign off?
I did want to add, not only has Joshua written a tremendously valuable set of books for Tableau, which are really excellent, very well written, Joshua. I really love reading them and utilizing them. But we also provide Tableau training and Alteryx training. So we have in Alteryx a 2-day beginner level training, also a 1-day advanced analytic apps training, and a 1-day predictive tools training as well. So if you do need training and you're interested, let us know. We can also customize the training and even bring it down to 1 hour of formats for the Alteryx training if needed. And we do those not only in person, but we can do them virtually by WebEx, just like this WebEx as well.
All right, thank you, Deanna, and thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. It's always a pleasure to serve you, and we look forward to sharing more in the future. If we didn't get to your question, we'll try to follow up, and as always, if you have any other questions or feedback for us, let us know. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.